Thank you all for joining us. Judy, can you start our discussion?
Well, does everybody have their book? Well, Laura and I had gone through it, and I think everybody had gotten it. We picked out some questions for discussion ahead of time. We chose question number 1, and I think we might get some discussion from this one. I'll just read it. It said, what preconceived ideas did you have about Mary and Martha before reading this book? Which woman do you relate to most, Mary or Martha? And explain your answer. Those are really 3 questions.
Did you wanted to say something, Mary?
I was going to say that when we moved here, I felt that I can be a Mary instead of a Martha. And I told Bob, I said, I'm no longer a Martha. I can concentrate on being a Mary. And he said, you're still a Martha. You're just a retired Martha. So that's, I think that's how I stand, retired Martha. But I feel I ought to concentrate more on being a Mary. I had so many opportunities to be a Mary before we moved here. And I'd like to look for those opportunities too.
When Patricia said that she thought that Martha was more of a doer and Mary more of a thinker, in some ways I also feel like Mary was more of a dreamer, not just a thinker. And I think I'm like 98% Martha and 2% Mary, which means I'm probably a failure at that. But I can almost run a Zoom meeting.
Well, I'm definitely a Mary. I'm more the opposite of Laura. I think I'm 98% Mary and only 2% Martha. I've never been a Martha. I mean, I'll do the job when it's needed, but I'm definitely a Mary.
Do you think Mary led a more prayerful life than Martha?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, given the time and some of the things she would talk about of the circumstances of the day, I think she recognized quicker than Martha the value of being there with Christ than helping with all the preparations that Martha was doing. And so I don't know that she was more prayerful than Martha. I mean, the women of the day, I'm sure they all had their, at the Sabbath prayer and everything. I mean, they were raised as good Jewish ladies, so they had their times of prayer. But no, I think, like Laura said, I think Mary was more of a dreamer, and she recognized that in Christ and knew the value of being with him. And if she's the one that actually did the anointing, she definitely recognized him as the Christ. Of course, Martha came to recognize that too, but
I think we have to be careful not to assume that one is worse than the other or one that is better than the other, because we're living in a real world. We have to be able to do the things that are still right and good and Christ-like, even though we're not dreaming all the time. There's a time for both of those things.
And I think that was the point of the whole book, was the balance between the Martha and the Mary side of every one of us, for us to find that balance. As the book progressed, you got more of a sense of that with the whole teeter-totter little story and how you balance your life between the prayer and the service and the hospitality.
Question 2 says, the story of Mary and Martha stirs up memories of sibling rivalry for many of us. What battles with your siblings do you remember the most? What did you do to get your parents to notice you?
Well, I had 4 brothers, and I'm the only girl. So I don't know that there was sibling rivalry there. I was also older than them. I had one brother 15 months younger, and the others were so much younger. I don't know that there was rivalry there, although I can remember losing my temper with my brother closest to me, a few times. But so I don't know that who got more attention. Maybe I got more attention in the sense that I was a girl. I didn't have to compete with things that they did. Like some of you have sisters, I would think it would be a little different.
I didn't identify with that. That's sort of in the beginning of the book. I didn't identify with the sibling rivalry as much because I was always apart. And my brothers always thought I got all the attention and I got all of everything. And I thought I was there to serve them, that I was there to be, I was always called the big little girl. So I was mommy's big little girl. So I became the little mother from very early on.
I had a family of 8, and I had 7 other siblings and sisters, but I really don't remember having a rivalry with them. The youngest in the family was Down syndrome, and my brother-in-law had asked my sister, did we resent her all the attention that was given to her when since she had so many more needs than the rest of us? But we never really felt that way. I don't remember feeling any rivalry.
I was 6 and when my sister was born, and people would stop and ask my mother, how's the baby doing? And they would ignore me, and it really made me mad because I didn't like to be ignored. So I thought, well, I'm not going to talk to them. If they're going to ignore me, I'm going to ignore them. Well, that's the only time I remember the rivalry. But as far as getting the parents' attention, later on at, say, in grade school or junior high, maybe, to get my mother's attention, I could play something soft and gentle, like Claire de Lune on the piano. But to get my dad's attention, I played Boogie Woogie because he hated it, and I played it loud and clear, and that got his attention all right. And I usually got sent to my room.
But mostly I remember is just noise and commotion in the family. I mean, it was constant noise with that many kids. And as far as how to get attention, I was in the 5th grade and I decided I would not talk for a year. And I didn't, except for confession, because I went to Procus school. We went to confession once a month. That's the only time I talked for a whole year.
You are kidding.
Not at home, not anywhere, and
Not at school?
no place. And
How old were you?
5th grade, and nobody noticed.
Really, because there were so many people around.
And that's what happens in large families.
Yeah.
My parents didn't notice, my brothers and sisters didn't notice, the school didn't notice.
You were in the middle. No.
And after a year, I thought, okay, that settles that. I know kind of where you're at in the pecking order.
Whoa.
Well, shall we move on to the next question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Here we go. According to Dr. Edward Hallowell, over half of us are chronic worriers. Which of the 10 signs of a big worrier on page 33 do you struggle with? And how do worry and anxieties spill over you into your daily life and affect your behavior and your physical health?
Well, I think right now, with where we are, with the virus and everything, I think every one of us has a certain amount of worry, whether it affects us personally or if we just look out what the economy is going to do. And how much longer do we have to put up with that kind of worry, you know? And my daughter is an office manager in a nursing home. I'm worried about her, you know?
I want to know what the difference is. It talks about being anxious too. Is there a difference between worrying and being anxious?
I think it's different because, I mean, worry, to me, worry is concern that something bad is going to happen, whereas being anxious isn't necessarily that you're worried that something bad's going to happen, but it's something about a situation sets you off, I guess. My dog has anxiety. And she worries, anyone who lives in my neighborhood knows that she worries if anyone walks down the street with something in their hand because she thinks they're going to hit her. She's anxious about cars. She's anxious about noise. But I think her anxiety is a mental disorder. I don't think it's that she's worrying like chronic.
I think chronic worrying is the same. It's the same thing. I think it's a semantic thing.
Yeah.
To tell you the truth, put it in context, and you might separate it out a little bit. But it's the chronic part that was getting to me. There are a lot of people I know that worry a lot. Ursula, say more.
Yeah, and people do have anxiety disorder. It's a medical thing. People get treated for that.
Well, I know Larry had a medical emergency several weeks ago, and I did feel very anxious because I remember my mouth was very dry. I know my heartbeat was just going really, really, really fast, and I'm sure it was an anxiety attack I was having because he was in distress, and I was waiting for the emergency squad to arrive. And that's different from the kind of Jewish mother worrying with my children growing up. So that's two different things completely. If that makes any difference, Ursula, as to differentiating between what anxiety is. The anxiety, I felt a physical change in my whole body, my whole being. Whereas worry, it was softer.
And there's a difference between what they were describing here was a state of worry, a state of anxiety. That's the kind of ongoing stuff that people feed off of, becomes part of their personality. We all get anxious. We all worry over things. The first few times I went to Food Lion with my mask on, I was highly anxious, but I wasn't in a state of anxiety. I was just anxious and didn't like the mask on, didn't like all that closed in feeling and looking around at people and worrying. You put all the words together about if somebody might be carrying the virus and all the stuff that we've been dealing with on some level or another for the last couple of months.
There used to be a saying somewhere in the back of my brain that I've heard, keep your eyes on the prize. So, that's a good motto for me anyway.
Okay, we'll go on to question 4. And it said,
could I just add one final thought to this?
Uh-huh.
My husband taught me something that that I've watched him practice, and it has really informed me a great deal. What he has said over and again, when there's something that's big and out of his control, he doesn't get upset. He can get upset over losing his glasses or being late or something, or just stress over something. But when it comes to something big, he is as calm as a cucumber. And last summer, I had an accident. However it happened, I just I could put go instead of stop, and I went into the sliding back door with the golf cart last summer, and everything went into smithereens, and we needed a whole new double door system. Al was down in the gully about 20 yards away, and he just heard it, and he stopped what he was doing, picked everything up, came up and looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Fine." And then he left me and went around to the garage, got another door, got this, got that, calm as a cucumber. If that's cool as a cucumber. He was just calm as any, and I've seen that so many times. I think that's a kind of lovely quality to have, to be able to be that cool in times of a crisis and get practical. And that's sort of what Mary Carroll was talking about too. Know what you can't control, what you can, and do what you can on a practical level. Anyway, that was just floating through my mind.
Okay, question 4 is read the wagon and the rocks story on pages 48 to 51. Take a look at your wagon. Which rocks has God asked you to carry? Which rocks have you unwisely and sometimes unconsciously volunteered to carry for someone else?
I would like to say one thing about a friend of mine, Lori McDonald. She died last month. But anyway, she was a friend of mine in Northern Virginia, and she was she was always helping somebody do something. She had a long list of things that she wanted to do and felt the need to do. And people were always asking her for help, and she felt completely overwhelmed with all these requests. And she said to me once, she said, my life is just getting so complicated. I can't stand this anymore. I've learned to say no. And I realized the reason I couldn't say no before was because I was too proud. And now I'm learning a little humility that I can say no to.
Yes.
I think it takes wisdom, though, to be able to get to that point where you can truthfully say, I would love to help you, but I really can't do that.
Okay, Judy, number 5.
Oh, sorry, I was thinking about that. Number 5. Here we go. Do you ever feel the driven, perfectionist, spiritual Martha Stewart coming out in you? What does she look like at home? What does she look like at church?
See, this is one of those questions that to me felt kind of Protestant, and I think she might have been coming from the perspective of being a pastor's wife, which is something that maybe the deacons' wives feel, but it's not something that I think that generally Catholics necessarily share the kind of role that she as a pastor's wife in a whatever kind of Protestant church she was a member of would feel. Was she a Baptist?
I think she was a Baptist at heart because she said, I know when I die, I'm going right to heaven. And I said, she's a Baptist.
I hope when I die, I go to Purgatory.
But I think her husband was Presbyterian.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I had an aunt, as a matter of fact, my godmother, my father's sister, and of course she was Lutheran, and she always said that when she dies, she's going to go straight to heaven because she had hell on earth.
Well, one of Father Duffy's sermons, Father Duffy said that is the sin of presumption.
The sin of presumption?
The sin of presumption,
When you think you go
it's when the virtue of hope is overdone,
and
it becomes a sin of presumption. And the other end of the hope is despair. So
well, but think about that. The others who died on the cross at the same time as Christ, he went right to heaven.
I mean, I'm saying that's what that is about. That belief.
But the thing is that he was there, and he, I would say, made a perfect act of contrition. He recognized God, that God was there on the cross with him. He asked for forgiveness, and he was truly sorry, and Jesus forgave him. That's different than saying, I'm baptized, and therefore, no matter what I do, it's a one-way Zoom elevator to heaven at the time I die.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about it a little differently. I mean, short of grave sin, we're all going to heaven, and there are many rooms in my Father's house. And I think those many rooms are in whatever state of grace. This is just how I do it. Whatever state of grace I'm in, I probably can't come into the light fully enough, and it's just I'm being prepared little by slowly in those different rooms for the fullness of heaven. There's heaven, and then there's heaven, I guess is what I'm saying, that I still have a journey into God that has more perfecting. And that somehow or other, that thief on the cross had his journey into God by being on that cross. That's what I was pondering, by the way, his place on the cross. And he never said, I'll see you in heaven, Jesus. He pretty much said, I'm kind of doomed, but you're innocent. And Jesus invited him. Oh my God, Jesus invited him into heaven
Remember me when you go into the kingdom.
Remember me when you go into the kingdom. Yes.
Okay, on question 6, the author has written about intimacy with God that comes through prayer plus the word plus time. Which of these 3 disciplines is most difficult for you and which comes easiest? And Judy and I laughed when we went through this question. I said, well, I'm Catholic, so it's the word. I think for me, the word is the hardest, and as I get older, I think prayer is the easiest.
I remember so well in college, I was maybe a junior in college, and we had, it was a prayer meeting or something. I forget what the venue was at the time, but one of my classmates, younger, maybe freshman, sophomore, she had started with, she said, have you heard the good news? And I'm like, what? What is she talking about? What's going on? Like, and she was talking about the good news, the Bible, the word of Jesus Christ. And I'm like, what is she talking about? I've never heard that before. So I guess not growing up reading the Bible, only as an adult, it's been a real eye opener, you know.
I find the most difficult is just the time, allocating that time every single day. Prayer is easy. Prayer life is easy. And I read the Bible every day. I read Bible studies all the time. So the word, that's just part of my life. It's just, it's there, it's been there. So, but the difficulty is time. My husband and I still own a business. Well, we did until this. Now it's destroyed, but we have, well, you can see behind me some of it. But anyway, so I have those things I have to do every day or had to do. So putting that time into it and dedicating that time every single day is the hardest thing that I find. Prayer, very easy.
I spend a lot of time on the telephone anymore. I'm here by myself. I have no one to talk to, so I end up calling people that I enjoy talking to, or sometimes it's just somebody that I haven't had contact with for a while, or somebody who is in worse shape than I am. And I call them and I talk to them. And in some worlds, that would be a wasted time just to sit and talk for a half an hour to somebody on the phone. But sometimes it's time well spent.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yes, that's not a waste of time, Marianne.
One of the best things that's come out of this pandemic is learning how to use technology like this, which can help you communicate with people who are isolated or far away or whatever. And I just think it's a great blessing.
Yeah, it is.
I'm very anal. And so when I say I'm going to allocate 1-2 hours a day, I will allocate and do that faithfully day after day, month after month. And so time might be difficult. If I've said that's my time for God, that'll be my time for God. If I don't allocate it and don't say, you've got, this is what you're going to do, I don't do it.
Well, you must be a very disciplined person then.
Anal, perfectly, just anal. This is it.
Tricia, and I bet you feel better about yourself. Things seem to go better for me when I discipline myself and I do actually, this is a prayer time in the morning. This is what I do at noon. This is what I do at, you know.
Yeah.
But it does, you feel better about yourself.
Judy, do you want to go to number 7? Lessons from Lazarus. Which is the following lessons from Lazarus?
Have you found most true in your life? Explain the circumstances involved and what you learned. God's will does not always proceed in a straight line, and God's love sometimes tarries for our good and his glory. God's ways are not our ways, but his character is still dependable. God's plan is released when we believe and obey. The end is never the end, it is only the beginning. There were 5 of them.
I love the last one. The end is never the end, it's only the beginning. Why? When I was 19 years old and got married, I never imagined that 51 years later I'd be married. I didn't know what being married 51 years was even entailed. And yet every day is a gift. So an end is never an end. It's just the beginning. It's the start. And so that's the lesson I really found from that.
I chose God's ways are not our ways, but his character is still dependable. And I'm looking back 32 years at taking care of my mother who had pancreatic cancer. And our family and others and her friends prayed and prayed that she would be healed. And despite all our many, many, many prayers and a healing service, it became obvious that she was not going to be healed of pancreatic cancer and that she was going to die, which she did. And I realized that that was God's way of healing her death and her entrance into eternal life. That is God's healing. So God did heal her, and he did answer our prayers in his own way. So that's why I chose number 3 there of the list of choices.
I chose number 1, but I don't know that it's necessarily that God's will is not always in a straight line. What I think is that I don't always recognize what God's will is. So I'm the one who's on this uneven line. God may be in this straight line and I veer off and get lost in the woods, and then I fall into some quicksand, and then, different things happen.
Rocks in your wagon.
Yeah, I have all those rocks in my wagon.
Another rock.
And load them. Not just rocks. I have trash in my wagon and some cinder blocks and all kinds of stuff. So I don't think it's that God's will doesn't proceed, but I think sometimes it's what I think is God's will. And it's my perception, not his will. And once I actually pay attention to what it is he wants me to do, then it is a straight line. It's just sometimes I lose sight that it's a straight line.
What is the Garth Brooks song that he has
Unanswered Prayers?
Yeah.
That's number 2.
What's number 2?
That there's a Garth Brooks song called Unanswered Prayers, and it's about this guy who's in love with this woman and he wants it to work out. And then a long time later, he sees his high school sweetheart somewhere and he realizes that he's much better off with his wife and that God didn't answer his prayers, that it would work out with this woman. And it was a good thing it didn't happen. Yeah, I think of that as number 2. But I don't think it's God's will that tarries for our own good. I don't think it's God's love, because I don't think God's love ever really tarries. I think God's love is constant.
Mm-hmm. Can't imagine why.
Oh, it's so worth it, Marianne.
Okay, I'm going to move on to number 8, which is consider the differences between Mary and Judas's love for Christ. Mary had a heart of gratitude and Judas had a heart of greed. Mary came with abandon and Judas came with an agenda. Mary heard what Jesus said and responded. Judas heard but did not understand. And Mary held nothing back. Judas gave nothing up. What aspect of Mary's love comes easiest to you, and which aspect is most difficult for you?
We were talking about money a little while ago. Sorry, Ursula.
Go ahead.
Al and I were talking about money. He said, I don't know what our lives would be like if we had to worry and scramble for our next meal or go to one of these resource centers to get our food and have lost the job. And Pat was saying they had a job until the pandemic. She didn't say any more than that. They owned a business. We are, like Ursula said, more blessed than we could ever imagine. We're not only not, we probably all have a little money in the bank and may not be millions, but we have enough to live on and not have to sell things. We have the lake. I live in a neighborhood where if there was somebody who was tested positive, we'd all know within the hour. And it's just so nice to know that it's totally virus free. But that's such a luxury to be in that position.
Mm-hmm. It is.
You know, one of my nieces works in New York Presbyterian. She's an administrator and does quality control type things, but she's there all the time. She's got a 3-year-old daughter, and her husband are at home, and they live in Hoboken. And Hoboken was one of the early hot spots of all of this.
Yeah.
And after living through it, and then of course, you know, when you're a healthcare person, you have to say yes. And so she was taking the tube over to New York and going to work. And then about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, her mother-in-law and father-in-law, who live in suburban New Jersey, said, we have another home down at the shore. We're going to go down to that home and let you and your husband and your daughter come live here within the safety of our acre and be outside and play with your daughter outside. And spring is here. And you just come and take over this house. Talk about gifts and gratitude and people coming through. It's not the front line, but they did what they could do. They gave up their home for their daughter, a daughter-in-law, a son and daughter-in-law. Anyway, I think about gratitude. I think about so many people in a different place. And I wonder, often I wonder that I should be doing something and I should be doing more. And I'm not in a position to do much.
We're doing things now that we never would have done, and it's giving us a better life in many ways.
Yeah.
It's hard to see it sometimes, but there are good things coming out of this.
It's allowing you to prioritize what's really important. And that's a gift if you actually take this time to do it. So
what got me the most, I think, was when we had the global or the aerial view of the earth and different cities, and how the fumes are gone and the air is clear. And look what we've done to our earth in terms of its supplies for us and its goodness. We've done terrible things, and then these cars get us. We go. The hardest thing in the beginning for me was to not be able to just get in my car and go somewhere. Well, I can get in my car and drive, but I can't go somewhere. So I'm not going in stores. I'm not going to go spend money. I'm not gonna. So I've made peace with that now, and it's kind of nice.
I think what we did, we attributed to the climate safety. Like you said, we're not driving around. I just read a report the other day that the canals in Venice are so clear they can look down to the bottom, which has not happened ever, you know. And of course, not too many people are flying right now. And if you could give me all kinds of money, I would not go in a plane right now, you know, and things like that. It shows. It becomes visible.
They're finding fish in the canals in Venice, which they haven't found in decades.
Yeah, like the animals roaming around some of the city streets. Yeah.